Behind velvet ropes and paddle numbers, fortunes are decided in seconds, masterpieces disappear into private vaults, and names are whispered more than spoken. This isn't just art. It's power, prestige, and a game only billionaires can afford to play. Welcome to the world of high-stakes auctions, where history is bought and legends are sold. Let's begin with the night a painting shattered every record on Earth. In November 2017, inside Christie's New York, as once-forgotten painting took the stage. It was Salvator Mundi, attributed to Leonardo da Vinci, a portrait of Christ holding a crystal orb with a gaze that seemed to see through centuries. The bidding started at $100 million. 19 minutes later, the hammer dropped at an earth-shattering $450.3 million, smashing every art auction record in history. The identity of the buyer remained a mystery until it leaked that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had acquired the piece through an intermediary. Suddenly, a painting that had once been purchased for just $1,175 in 1958 was now at the heart of royal politics, religious symbolism, and global attention. But Salvator Mundi didn't go quiet. Experts still debate whether the painting is truly a Leonardo or the work of one of his students with Davinci's finishing touches. The condition, heavily restored, only adds fuel to the fire. Despite its astronomical price, the painting hasn't been seen publicly since. It wasn't just a sale, it was a spectacle, a reminder that in the world of billion-dollar collectors, belief often matters more than the truth. From Da Vinci to Picasso, the artist who dominates auction houses like no one else. If there is one name that echoes through every major auction house, it's Picasso. His works are a magnet for billionaires, and the numbers don't lie. More than 10 of his paintings have crossed the $100 million mark. In 2015, La Femme de Alger went for an astonishing $179.4 million at Christie's, setting a record at the time for the most expensive painting ever sold at auction. Collectors like casino mogul Steve Wynn and Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich have both been linked to massive Picasso purchases. His catalog is so vast yet so iconic that new pieces constantly rotate through Sotheby's and Christie's, guaranteeing frenzy every time. Unlike other artists whose top works are locked in museums, Picasso's paintings move between hands, countries, and private vaults. There's always another version, another variation, another story behind the canvas. For collectors, owning a Picasso isn't just an investment, it's a status symbol, a way to say, I have a piece of the man who reshaped art itself. But what about a painting that was once lost and then found in a closet? In 2014, in a dusty attic in Toulouse, France, a forgotten painting was discovered behind a wall, covered in grime, water-stained, and almost thrown out with the junk. It was only by chance that a local auctioneer spotted it and called in an expert. The canvas showed Judith beheading Holofernes, and the style was unmistakable. After months of analysis, the unbelievable was confirmed. It could very well be a lost Caravaggio. The painting had supposedly disappeared over 500 years ago. Suddenly, it was in the headlines and in the hands of intense debate. Some art historians swore it was real, others were skeptical. But what couldn't be denied was its power. Dark, violent, and hauntingly detailed, it had the emotional voltage Caravaggio was known for. Before it could even reach in public auction, it was snapped up in a quite private sale. Though the final figure was never disclosed, rumors placed the price north of $100 million. The buyer remains anonymous. In a world obsessed with provenance, here was a masterpiece that skipped centuries and made billionaires fight over its truth. Not all bidders raise a paddle in person. Some prefer to stay in the shadows. In the world of record-breaking art auctions, the person holding the paddle is rarely the one writing the check. Billionaire buyers often remain in shadows behind the spotlight, working through agents, financial advisors, and shell companies designed to hide their identity. Sometimes it's about privacy, sometimes it's about taxes, often it's both. At Christie's and Sotheby's, it's not unusual for staff to know only the representative, not the real buyer. These reps sit in VIP boxes or on the phone line, signaling millions with a nod. After the sale, the names might never be revealed, or they might surface months later, carefully leaked to the press to build prestige. In recent years, Chinese billionaires and tech titans have flooded the scene. Figures like Jack Ma and Ma Hu-tang have been linked to private acquisitions, and new buyers from Singapore and Dubai are entering bidding wars traditionally dominated by European collectors. These players aren't just buying art, they're building influence. A high-profile win at auction becomes a global signal: you've arrived. and you're playing at the top. And sometimes it's not individuals but entire nations competing for a painting. Not all art wars are fought with money. Some are waged with lawsuits, diplomatic pressure, and decades of resentment. The Elgin marbles, removed from the Parthenon in the early 1800s and now housed in the British Museum, remains at the heart of a long-running dispute between Greece and the UK. Greece has demanded their return for over 40 years, calling them cultural theft. Britain claims legal acquisition. Neither side is backing down. Italy has a special task force, the Carabinieri Art Squad, dedicated to locating and reclaiming artwork looted during wars or smuggled out in past centuries. Museums around the world have quietly returned stolen Roman statues and Renaissance pieces under diplomatic pressure. But others dig in, protected by murky ownership trails. It's not uncommon for countries to bid in auctions anonymously through cultural ministries or museums to reclaim heritage on the open market when legal routes fail. Sometimes nations go head-to-head with private billionaires, turning auctions into geopolitical chess matches. For these countries, the fight isn't about prestige, it's about identity. For collectors, it's about access to legacy. The clash between cultural repatriation and private ownership is becoming one of the most bitter divides in the art world. Now let's take a peek inside auction rooms where these dramas unfold. An auction room at Sotheby's or Christie's isn't just a venue, it's a stage, and every moment is scripted to trigger adrenaline, ambition, and ego. The lighting is soft but focused. The crowd is hushed, except for the rhythmic patter of the auctioneer, whose voice rises like a metronome on fire. Each gesture is deliberate. Each pause engineered tension. The auctioneer isn't just calling numbers, they're performing, teasing bids out of poker-faced billionaires, egging on rivalries without saying names. At 150 million, fair warning, last chance. The gavel doesn't just close the sale, it declares a winner. VIPs don't sit with the crowd. They're tucked into sky boxes, often watching through one-way glass, bidding by phone through personal reps who know how to keep things quiet. Some use sealed bids, handed over in envelopes. Others operate through whisper networks, where details are hinted at before the artwork even hits the room. It's more than commerce, it's a ritual. The room itself is weaponized to encourage competition. Champagne flows, advisors circle, everyone watches everyone. When a paddle goes up, it's not just money being spent, it's reputation, pride, and legacy being carved in real time. And when the gavel drops, the real story often begins afterward. When the gavel hits, the public show ends. But behind the scenes, a whole new process begins. The winner bidder doesn't just walk out with a painting. First come the appraisals, authenticity checks, and in many cases, quiet but critical restorations. $100 million artwork might need a micro crack repaired or a 500-year-old canvas stabilized before it's ever hung. Often, it's never hung at all. Many high-value pieces are sent straight to free ports, ultra-secure, tax-advantaged storage facilities in Geneva, Singapore, or Delaware. These climate-controlled vaults are the Fort Knox of the art world, holding billions in masterpieces that rarely, if ever, see daylight again. Security becomes as important as provenance. 9-figure pieces are insured like aircraft carriers, GPS tracking, biometric access, private armed escorts. Every movement is monitored. One insurance firm once said moving a Picasso from Paris to New York costs more than flying a private jet. Some collectors display their price, others tuck it away, letting it appreciate in silence. Because in the world, owning the art isn't about enjoying it, it's about having it. Let's talk about one man who's turned art buying into a public spectacle. Ken Griffin doesn't bid with bravado. He doesn't pose with paintings. But when he buys, the art world listens. In 2015, the hedge fund Billionaire quietly acquired Interchange by Willem de Koning for a reported $300 million, one of the highest prices ever paid for a painting. In the same deal, he picked up Jackson Pollock's number 17A for another $200 million. These weren't secret buys hidden in a vault. Griffin turned around and lent both pieces to the Art Institute of Chicago, one of the country's most respected museums. It wasn't just generosity, it was strategy. By placing them in public view, he added cultural legitimacy to what would otherwise be private acquisitions, and he ensured that his name was linked not just to wealth, but to cultural stewardship. Griffin's growing collection includes Cézanne, Monet, and Jasper Johns. He's not building a personal museum, but a narrative. one where his legacy as a financier merges with the performance of art history. It's a modern version of what the Rockefellers and Morgans once did. In Griffin's hands, art isn't just a collectible, it's a form of quiet power. But what about the trend of art being bought, not by people but by machines? In March 2021, seismic shift hit the art world, not on canvas but on blockchain. A digital artwork by people titled Every Day's The First 5,000 Days sold at Christie's for a staggering $69 million. It wasn't a painting, it wasn't tangible. It was an NFT, a non-fungible token, and it sent a shockwave through an industry that had existed for centuries on oils and marble. Suddenly, art didn't need a frame, it needed a wallet address. Since then, Sotheby's has leaned in, hosting NFT auctions and even selling AI-generated art. One piece by a Paris-based collective called Obvious, created using machine learning, sold for $432,500. Critics called it a gimmick, but collectors, they saw a revolution. This new wave challenges everything traditional auctions are built on: provenance, permanence, even physical ownership. A JPEG on a screen now holds the same value as a Rembrandt, depending on who's bidding. All god institutions are racing to keep up, merging the prestige of their history with the chaos of digital creativity. The question isn't whether digital art is valid, it's whether it can stand the test of time or just the next blockchain update. Still, when it comes to power moves, nothing beats buying history itself. Art doesn't decorate walls. It signals influence, allegiance, and defiance. In recent years, billionaires have turned art into a soft weapon in geopolitical games. Russian oligarchs, even under high sanctions, have continued to buy Western masterpieces through layers of intermediaries, stashing them in free ports outside jurisdiction. A Modigliani or a Rothko becomes more than a trophy. It's a safe haven for capital and a subtle display of untouchable wealth. Meanwhile, across Asia, a cultural reversal is taking place. Wealthy Chinese collectors are aggressively buying back antiquities once looted or sold during centuries of upheaval. Kai Ming-Chao, a Chinese collector, famously disrupted a Christie sale by winning a Qing dynasty bronze with a $19 million bid, then refusing to pay, calling it patriotic sabotage. Others have been less symbolic and more strategic, quietly repatriating scrolls, ceramics, and temple art with deep national significance. These actions speak volumes. Art becomes leverage. Whether it's a billionaire thumbing his nose at Western sanctions or a government using a painting to reclaim cultural identity, in this arena, a canvas can carry the weight of an embassy. But for some collectors, it's not about power, it's obsession. Some collectors don't just buy art, they build empires around it. Francois Pinault, the French billionaire behind luxury conglomerate Kering, didn't settle for private vaults. He opened the Palazzo Grassi and Punta della Dogana in Venice to house his personal collection, one of the largest in Europe. His museums are architectural marvels and cultural statements, filled with everything from Damien Hirst to Jeff Koons. In Los Angeles, Ali Broad took a similar path. Instead of donating to an institution, he created the Broad, a $140 million museum to showcase his collection of over 2,000 contemporary pieces, including works by Cindy Sherman, Roy Lichtenstein, and Jean-Michel Basquiat. Admission is free, but the message is clear. This is Broad's vision of modern culture. These museums serve multiple purposes. They offer public access, yes, but they also provide curation control, tax advantages, and personal legacy branding. The collector becomes more than a buyer. They become a cultural force. It's philanthropy dressed in granite and glass, but also an enduring claim to taste, influence, and power. When you control the narrative around art, you shape what the world sees and remembers. And if you think the money is crazy now, wait until we look at the auctions that never happened. Not every masterpiece makes it to the auction block. Some are stopped cold by the weight of history. One of the most difficult categories is Nazi-looted art, work stolen during World War II and never properly returned. Even decades later, ownership is murky, and auction houses tread carefully. One such case involved a Sheila painting pulled just days before a Sotheby's auction when heirs of the original Jewish owner filed a claim. Then there are works withdrawn under intense public backlash. In 2018, Christie's faced protests after announcing the sale of sacred Native American artifacts. Legal action, political pressure, and ethical outcry forced the house to reconsider. It wasn't about price, it was what the art represented. These situations are more than legal red tape. they're moral landmines. Auction houses must navigate international law, generational trauma, and public perception, all while managing elite buyers who want discretion and prestige, not controversy. Some art is simply too charged to change hands quietly, and in those moments, silence often speaks louder than a hammer strike. Let's go back to the biggest sales in history. Who spent the most and why? Some names appear again and again when art hits astronomical prices. Sheikh Hamad bin Abdullah Al Thani of Qatar has spent hundreds of millions acquiring rare works from Cezanne to Rothko with little public display, just private influence. His family's acquisitions have reshaped entire museum collections in Doha, helping establish Qatar as a global cultural power. Then there is Joseph Lau, the Hong Kong billionaire known as much for his art collection as his criminal conviction. He once dropped $67 million on a Warhol and a single Basquiat in the same evening. His motivation, a mix of passion, prestige, and strategic investing. Others include Steve Cohen, who famously bought a Pollock and then a Giacometti sculpture for over $140 million each, and Ken Griffin, whose record-smashing deals speak volumes without him ever saying a word. What drives them? It's rarely just love of the art. It's the ability to make a statement without speaking, to be etched into history without holding public office. Whether for ego, legacy, or financial gain, these buyers shape the market and the stories we tell about what's worth remembering. And what happens when art becomes more than a trophy? For the ultra-wealthy, art isn't just a passion, it's a strategy. In a volatile financial world, a Basquiat or a Monet becomes more than a masterpiece. It becomes a hedge, an asset that holds or grows in value while markets fluctuate. Blue chips paintings like Warhol's soup cans or Rothko's color fields are treated like stock, acquired, held, and eventually traded. Entire funds have emerged to treat art as equity, turning cultural icons into tradable commodities. It's not about beauty on the walls, it's about value in the vault. Now let's close with the quiet truth behind all this noise. In the high circles of wealth, art isn't just bought, it's performed. A $200 million painting is power on canvas, but the real value often lies in the moment it's claimed. When Ken Griffin wins a bidding war or Joseph Lau outbids a nation, they're not just acquiring art, they're writing themselves into history. Auction houses become arenas where legacies are sculpted in real time. The paddle goes up, the gavel comes down, and the myth begins. It's not about secrecy, it's about being seen. That Warhol on your wall, it whispers status louder than any title. In other words, legacy is measured not only by wealth but by visibility. Which one of these auction stories surprised you the most? Leave your thoughts in the comments.